today's topic, a very interesting one. I would like us to start with sharing the recent survey from the German perspective related to the issue of green energy. The climate survey back to August 2022, published by the European Investment Bank, revealed that 2/3 of Germans see the climate and environment as the biggest challenges the country is facing alongside rising living costs. 81% think that if we do not drastically reduce our consumption of energy and goods in the coming years, we will be heading for a global catastrophe. And then nearly 8 out of 10 Germans, or equal to 79%, feel that climate change is having an impact on their everyday life. 81% think that if we do not drastically reduce our consumption of energy and goods in the coming year, we will be heading for a global catastrophe. At the same time, 84% feel that the government is reacting too slowly, and only 27% think that Germany will succeed in substantially reducing its carbon emissions by 2030. And the impact of the war in Ukraine also bring a blessing in disguise, so to say, because the majority of German people, representing 54% of respondents, believe that the war in Ukraine and its consequences on oil and gas prices should accelerate the green transitions, especially among the younger groups, age of 15 to 29. And then when asked to rank their energy priorities, Germans are more divided on what their country should prioritize. 39% expecting their government to focus on energy supply diversifications to avoid being overly reliant on a single provider, whereas 38% believe that the development of renewable energy should be prioritized instead. So it's a very interesting survey, and then we could hear and exchange our perspective with this very interesting issue. So perhaps I would like to provide Jens about 15 to 20 minutes to share your slide or share your thoughts on this, and then afterwards we can have a free flow discussions. So Jens, the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you very much, Marquardt, also for having me, and for everyone for joining at this late evening time. So it was quite a spontaneous action. So Reza wrote me yesterday WhatsApp and said like, oh, maybe you can present something, and I was like, yes, of course, but so don't expect too much now. But so what I'm also would like to underline what Reza has said. So I'll give you a few. So I've prepared a few slides, but I'm also very interested in not only telling you about how the situation in Germany is, but also maybe to compare with Indonesia, and maybe to say to see like what is common, if there are common challenges or common practices of how academia promotes or kind of raises awareness for climate change, but what is also very different and cannot be done in the Indonesian context, and so maybe we have then a little bit of discussion about this. These issues. So what I'm doing, just trying to find the slides. This one. Okay, so wait. So also Reza, thanks for introducing me to this group. And so what I've prepared is, as I said, so just a few slides. About this kind of question, and I was asking Reza, okay, what can I do? And he was sending me this. This is I don't know from your course or from your recent teaching activities, but basically talking about different advocacy tactics that you can imagine, you can think of when talking about different actors. And here highlighted in red is okay. science and academia is doing policy analysis, research, also kind of evidence-based research. So there are different ways, different opportunities to engage with policy making, to engage with the public, to engage with media, to engage with people, to raise awareness, to create awareness, also to propose policy, propose certain recommendations for action, etc. So there is a whole range of different tactics, different strategies you can think of to in terms of advocacy work. And I'm going to present, and it's going to be rather quick, 11 different advocacy strategies, and I've clustered them around 3 clusters. So what you might first of all think about what research and academia does and should do, and then there's some kind of classical outreach activities. But I think that the third one might be most interesting, because there are some things also in Germany where scientists and academics are trying out new ways of raising awareness for climate change, doing advocacy for climate change. Okay, so and then we can discuss how effective this actually is. First of all, well, academia does academics, which is not too surprising, but German academics, to start with climate change research, do of course publish in journals, publish their books, and provide some in-depth analysis also for Germany to raise awareness. What will be the impact on German soils, on German weather patterns, on these kind of issues that you have all around the world, so kind of in-depth analysis. However, this research has been done for decades, and you can argue, well, there is it's hard to say what the direct policy impact is, particularly from a social science perspective. The second, and I kind of little bit run through this, so just to give you some ideas, is that what we see in Germany is that more and more universities provide special education programs around broader issues of sustainability, of climate resilience, climate adaptation, etc. So academic programs, interdisciplinary programs around these issues, where universities, as such here in the picture, this University of Augsburg, where you put together environmental scholars, social science scholars, natural science scholars, engineers, etc., to try to think about what could be an interdisciplinary perspective on climate change, on issues of sustainable development, etc. So here, academia tries to engage with the complexity of climate change, with the kind of multidisciplinary perspective that is needed to tackle, to solve issues related to climate change. But the problem is that this takes a lot of time and a lot of effort to talk to other disciplines, to find a common language, and to develop kind of research output that is relevant and goes beyond disciplinary boundaries. So this is kind of the second move we can see institutionally, also in Germany, that more and more universities and research institutions develop this kind of, well, umbrella institutes to talk about climate-related issue. And the third one, and here the European context comes in quite dramatically in terms of where the money is coming from. So Horizon 2020 or Horizon program and generally has a lot of effort on climate issues. So there are annually billions of euro in this field, mainly natural science, mainly and engineering, technology-oriented funding. But what is kind of stressed here is that there is a strong need for collaboration, particularly between European countries that are eligible for this, so to engage with each other. So, well, for me, that's a bit, I think, yeah, we need more kind of international collaboration beyond the European context. This is always the question where the money is coming from. But I think this is really needed also to learn from how other countries are dealing with certain issues. So if you think about early warning systems for extreme weather events, if you think about the social dimension of how societies adapt to climate change, of course, every country is different. Every country has a certain context that needs to be recognized. On the other hand, I think we can also learn from each other and try to think about if we see patterns, if we see commonalities, but also differences across countries. So that was kind of here's another one, just kind of the first three were more towards the classical academic daily works and daily routines. And then academia in Germany, when it comes to climate change, sustainability issues, is very active in terms of providing public lectures and public seminars, public workshops, where policymakers, but also the interested public is invited to join. For example, if there's a lecture series to critically engage with climate change issues. So they organize different seminars where they try to bring research insights into the public and to relevant stakeholders, which is a good opportunity to have a conversation between different stakeholder groups and academia. But on the other hand, these events are often a single event, so you have a 90 minutes event, and then nothing really happens afterwards except for some exchange. And then there is the broad field of engaging with media debates, and I don't know how it is here, but in Germany, German media tends to take always the same people. So if they find some like people who are well articulating themselves and bringing in new positions, they're going to be picked all the time again. So we have some famous or popular climate scientists who appear in media all over and over again. So there has been some criticism raised to this. But in general, academics are, I would say, at least some part in academia is very active in giving interviews, writing op-eds, contributing to documentaries, contributing to talk shows in public media, where they and some are really good at breaking down what the climate crisis means for people, what it also means for policy action. So they become public figures in a way that they stand for a certain position, and they have very, very strong positions on certain issues. On the other hand, the problem is that, well, at least some academics say that the complexity is reduced too much in public discourses or media discourses, that this is often well, not complex enough to argue in media debates. And policy dialogues is another important field, and here we had, for example, also some participatory formats, experimenting with so-called democratic innovations, such as citizen assemblies. So citizen assemblies are when you, for example, randomly choose 100, 200 people and let them come together. So they should represent the population to a certain extent. So different occupations, different age, different background, living in different areas in Germany. And this is kind of moderated by academics who are working on more the social aspect of the climate crisis, to participate and engage with policymakers, make policy recommendations, and develop new formats, democratic formats, participatory formats to engage with, to kind of build bridges between the public, between the people, and policymakers, decision makers, etc. So this is where you have put experts on the one hand, but also let them have a dialogue with the people. What I put as a disadvantage that it can be often frustrating how little is then implemented, because often these formats, and we see it also in other European countries, that there is first a strong political will to develop these formats, and then academics do their best to moderate these and orchestrate these to come to a certain, well, conclusion in terms of here are our recommendations. This is what the government should do. But until now, these formats mainly end in well, with little political impact, or with little of these recommendations are actually being implemented or are being discussed then further in parliaments and developed into laws or regulations. So this is kind of a positive and negative experience at the same time. Number 7 is that academia can also, or tries to lead by example. And here you see a picture of a university that has started very, very early to develop its profile as a kind of sustainability hub. So this starts with how the buildings are constructed, and ends with a specific study program where, for example, all students in the first semester, they're all doing the same around sustainability issues. So no matter if you're an engineer or want to become a doctor or want to become a lawyer, you have the same first semester where you start with the questions of the challenge of sustainability, and you develop your specific area further on, but the starting point is all from the grand sustainability challenges such as climate change for all students of the university. And then these universities start to have certain energy standards. They implement certain sustainable procedures to include their carbon footprint, to reduce their carbon footprint. So all the whole supply chain for what a university needs is trying to be improved towards more sustainable patterns. Okay, almost at the end. But what is very important, particularly in the last decades, when we're thinking about technological competitiveness, is there's usually a strong link between academic research and the aim to develop products that are internationally competitive, that are like green technologies, such as you see it here, solar panels, but also other wind turbine manufacturers, for example. So there is a strong link, for example, with research institutes that do a lot of work on efficiency of solar modules in close collaboration with industries. And this has had a huge push in the 1990s, mainly 1990s, early 2000s, where most solar power manufacturing capacity was in Germany. This has changed quite a bit with rising manufacturing in China. But this is one example where you have a strong collaboration, always with the aim to develop products that can also be used later on. And for Indonesia, for example, that would also be interesting to discuss, and how far this is possible, this is reasonable, since Indonesia aims to, for example, for solar power, to develop a domestic market and have a certain share of domestic products that should be part of any project. And but this requires certain conditions and also a good environment to develop this kind of collaboration between industry and academia. So bureaucratic hurdles can be very, very high, and kind of disincentivize these kind of collaborations. Number 9, and here it gets a little bit special with or this is somehow more understandable if you know kind of the German history, is that there is a strong connection between academia and civil society organizations. And Germany, as you might know, has a long history of environmental movement, particularly the anti-nuclear movement. So civil society organizations, NGO, working on environmental awareness raising, on issues of biodiversity, issues of climate change, and a strong protest movement against nuclear power. And this has over decades developed kind of strong relations between civil society organizations who, for example, as you can see it here, count and try to, well, basically counting flora and fauna in certain areas, and with a strong cooperation with research, with academics who trying to make sense of what they see and trying to do research on, for example, biodiversity protection. So there is a strong connection between environmental organizations, environmental NGOs, and actually a research activity. So it's very practically oriented. And this has actually also led to what some would consider rather controversial, is in how far academia and how far researchers should take strong normative positions and should, for example, engage with climate activism. So there is a lot of debate and an ongoing debate about what makes you a researcher, what makes you an academic, and where is the boundary to activism? When do you become an activist? And some say you shouldn't cross that boundary. So there should be a difference between evidence-based, neutral academic research. And others say, well, this boundary is constructed anyway, so there's always a certain amount of normative positioning in whatever you do, and even if you're an engineer or an economist or a natural scientist or a social scientist, so we cannot avoid any positioning. So we should also be activists, and there is actually no chance not to be an activist if you're a researcher. So there is a debate, and you can think about where you would position yourself in this kind of debate. But there is an advantage to directly engage with the social concerns, the political concerns around climate change, for example. But of course, there is also a strong disadvantage, and people experience this. For example, there is started with that kind of scientists for future, you see it here, but also there is scientist rebellion who are really doing protests on the streets, and kind of also disruptive, civil disobedient protests against the government, against industries, against businesses, etc. And they are also becoming an easy target for their opponents, as they say, okay, climate scientists should not take any side, but whether focus on evidence-based research. So it's quite a controversial situation. And finally, and that goes along with this, is that over the last 2, 3, 4 years, we've seen more and more scientists or climate scientists, climate researchers, climate academics going to court together with other organizations. So it's mainly led by environmental organizations, civil society organizations, groups like Fridays for Future, together supported by academics, to go to court and sue the German government, for example, for not doing enough against climate change. And so far they had quite some success. So there was one of the decisions, and what you can see here is our Supreme our Supreme Court with the judges, and they, I think it was 2021 or 22, where they decided that the German government has to reform its climate law, and has to be more ambitious and also more concrete in terms of how it wants to achieve the Paris Agreement, or the commitment under the Paris Agreement, to better monitor and track that Germany is on track. So there is some kind of success here. However, in terms of implementation, this is another issue. But here you can see where, with support from academics, so they had a certain argument based on certain scientific evidence, to say that the German government is not doing enough, and the court said, yes, you should do more. Okay, so these are kind of 11 different ways of how research and academia can work on climate change. Just to wrap up, it's kind of hard to measure which of these strategies and tactics are effective and which ones are not. But what you can say is that a single measure is often not enough. So it has little effect if you if you're on a talk show or if you're writing a paper. So this is mainly what I'm doing. So I'm more on the traditional side, but then the downside of this is actually like who actually reads your papers and who actually is really cares about what you're doing. If you're just publishing in journals that only your peer group reads. So all these single measures are usually not enough to have some kind of impact, but you need a combination of different of these. And so academia has many roles to play, and it's also experimenting with different roles and partly also controversial roles that work in certain systems but might not work in others. So they're providing scientific evidence, organizing public consultations, but also, as I said, doing protest activities to gain more attention for the issues they're working on. And what is also important is that whatever you do also requires, and you're very aware of this, kind of a window of opportunity, because you can write the best paper ever, but if it's just not the right time, think about Corona, for example, during the pandemic, and Reza has read out the kind of survey data that people at that time didn't really care about climate change, but they had other issues, or think about the war in Ukraine. So if you don't have the right kind of environment to make your voice heard, it becomes very difficult to make your voice heard in the public discourse. And there's also difference between short-term attention. So you might get a lot of clicks with a certain Twitter feed or X feed or an Instagram story. But the question is if this really systematically or structurally changes anything in how we deal with climate change. And that's basically it. And I end with a question mark. How does it work in Indonesia? And I'm really curious to hear about what of these kind of different strategies and tactics you find that's appropriate, so to say, also for the Indonesian context, and which ones you would say you're handling things differently here, and what is it maybe also that I kind of missed for the Indonesian context? You would say that this is important in Indonesia, but I didn't put it on the German map. So and of course, any questions you have, any comments, any critique, any suggestions, I'm more than happy to hear. And with that, I think I'm giving it back to Reza.